I just want to say hello. Hi, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. I'm a little jet lagged, so bear with me.
Just give a 2 second delay on everything. um, First, I just wanted to say congratulations on your National Society of Film Critics win and your BAFTA, Oscar, and Critics' Choice nominations. We're very exciting. Woo. How does it feel at the moment?
It's nice. I mean, I think whenever you do work and it's appreciated on, a large scale, it's kind of why you got into the business, so it feels really nice. Yeah.
Well, congrats. That's great. I just wanted to start off with the beginning of your career. I know there was a stage where you aimed to be an art curator, and then you kind of pivoted to cinematography, working on various films in your early career like Macho and Palo Alto. What did you learn on those projects, and has anything changed in the 20 years or so that you've been in the industry? Also, bonus question, what did your beginnings as an aspiring art curator colour your cinematography? Are there any photographers or artists that inspire you and your work?
Yeah, I mean, I went to AFI, so that's a film school in Los Angeles, and I think for me, I didn't really know when I was younger that I wanted to be a DP. I love looking at art. My mom always took me to the movie theater, and I did photography when I was in high school, and so I developed my own photos. I always had a camera with me when I was like going around with my family. I hung out with my cousins a lot, and then when I went to college, I got one of those like little camcorders, mini DV camcorders, and so I'd bring that around with me when I'd hang out with my friends to like parties and
You were the one that was always.
yeah, I think just wherever we were going, my girlfriends and I like we would take trips or I just brought it everywhere. And at the time, I don't think I really looked at it as being a filmmaker. It was just capturing my friends, and then I had a iMac, and I would do an iMovie. I'd make them into movies, and I'd put music on them. So that was kind of the first, inkling of like wanting to shoot, but I didn't really know what a DP was. I watched movies, but I didn't really know exactly what that job meant. So it wasn't until college at LMU that took a genre course in film, and we had to write papers on the stuff that we saw. And so that kind of ignited like, something in me to ask like what a DP was. And then I graduated, worked in advertising, and then finally found AFI through just research because I was like, what is a DP? Like, what is that? What does that mean? And that led me to schools because I didn't know anybody in the film business. So to find out like what the job was about, I had to go to school. And that program was kind of really beneficial for me because I didn't really go in there with film experience. I didn't get in the first year, I got in the second year, which was also good for me because then before I got in, I got a job working on a documentary series that took me all over the world, the Middle East and across the US. And I learned a lot from those DPs. So yeah, that's kind of how I found it through photography, really, and then doing my homework and going to school. And when I was at school, because I wanted to work in art history, or I was there for art history major, Helen Levitt, Gordon Parks, like these were the type of photographers that really inspired me, which is kind of along the lines of what I was doing. It was like, photojournalist stuff or social documentary photography where you were just observing, like you were in the room with people, but you were observing their faces and their emotions. And, your eye was kind of, you were giving them, your perspective on the moment. And so I really loved that. So those are probably two photographers that I really enjoy.
Nice. Um, Next question. Something that we actually have in common is a love for 70s film. I know you have a particular affinity for film and anamorphic lenses because of the big scope and the cinematic feel, as well as a love for dark exposure and natural looking lighting. We actually have a clip from Sinners. I think it's a stunning example of how you light scenes. If we could play the first clip, please. Thank you so much. Pure cinema, beautiful. Could you talk a bit about your experience shooting in IMAX and Ultra Panavision and what kind of methods you use when you're translating your signature style between those two formats?
I mean, there was a progression into shooting this format. I think maybe some people have heard that when Ryan originally conceived of the project, he wanted to shoot on 16 mil.
Yes.
And then we explored 35, and then we ultimately ended up here. And I think one thing with him is like, because we've worked together before, is if he has an idea and he's very excited about it, he'll usually call me and it's always going to be something we've never done before, and we're going to explore it. And that's like a place that I like to live in creatively. And so it's always a great call when he has something new. So when he called and was like, let's look at what that means, what large format means. I've never shot large format. So, um, you just get all of your kind of information. Early on, it was like, let's go to a screening and look at some 70 prints of, other films that we are familiar with. And then I went and did a camera test because he wanted to go out to the desert to look at like a flat horizon. And we went and did a test, and I brought out like, all the lenses that, I admired. And we also shot some 35, so we did ultra panavision. And he brought that up because he was interested in looking at that format for the like really wide scope, but also just for a storytelling device. He felt it was appropriate to kind of show that the South and the Mississippi horizon. And so he brought that up, so I picked my favorite lenses, ultra panatars, because I mostly work with Panavision. And then we took a package out to the desert and we did a test in IMAX, so 5 perf and 15 perf. And it was beautiful. It was like a small crew. A couple of my guys came out and we just waited for the sun to set, and I found like a model that had really beautiful like facial structure, and put him in the frame, and we shot some film, and then we projected it at Photochem and also at Playa Vista, which is the headquarters of IMAX, and 70 mil, and it was beautiful. And I think the moment that we both saw those images, like both of them separately, we fell in love, and you weren't looking back. So I think for me, it's always exciting to do new things. Not that I've done everything, but that's one thing that I think, like I was mentioning with him, it's like every time we do a film, we do something new so far. So I think that's what like ignites the work and keeps it creative and keeps it fresh and exciting for audiences, because he's definitely someone who cares about his audience. So
Definitely, 100%. Speaking of prep, when you're doing that test, what other kinds of prep do you do when you're embarking on a project with either a new director or someone you have history with, like Ryan? Are there any shortcuts you've been able to develop since you've been doing it for so long? Or any just like interesting ways you choose to test different lenses and shots?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most important thing I always tell students or like young people, it's like find your community, find people that you like. I mean, I've had experiences, after school, after I went to school, working with people that I didn't like. Those jobs didn't go as well as I would have hoped. But the more and more you kind of shoot and meet people and people recommend you, you end up, going on a path of like, finding the right people. And what I mean by right people is just that people that are looking to tell the same story that you are. Because I think that's really important. It's not really, for me at least, it's not just a job. I think because it's so time consuming and so much energy is put into these things, and I have a family, and you leave your family for 6 to 12 months to make these bigger projects, it has to be worth my while, and it has to be with good people that are inspiring, that care and are kind. So early on, I think for me, I was fortunate enough to meet good people, like Gia Coppola, who I met through a friend. And we ran around early on and just shot stuff, that we thought that was pretty. We ran around and shot stuff that really inspired us, because we were in control of that. Like, that's always nice, is when you can be in control of everything that you're shooting. Because as you get older and as you get jobs, you have less control, right? Because there's management, there's money on the line, or there's like a goal that you have to fulfill. It can be a job sometimes. So early on, I think it was nice to like find friends to make films with, because that's like where I sit today. I love making films with friends. It's when I do my best work. Not to say I haven't done films with people that I didn't know, but they were good people, because I think it's hard for me to do work if I don't like the person.
So you gotta have that actual like
Yeah.
lovely relationship with them in order
Yeah.
to like do a repeated relationship.
At least for me. I mean, I know some other people that goes the opposite direction.
That makes sense as well, to be honest. I know you said collaboration is key in finding the best rhythm, and as you're saying, like a personal relationship as well with them. How do you manage to bring your personal style to someone else's vision? How much give and take is involved, do you think, like on average, when you're working with like a Ryan or a Gia?
Yeah, I mean, I'm older now, so everyone looks younger than me in here.
Yeah, definitely. Well,
But Yeah, early on, I think it was funny because when you go to film school, everyone's so focused on like themselves and you're comparing yourself to everyone, right? So it's like who's doing the best stuff, whose stuff looks the best, who knows the most. There's a lot of that going on. And it's nice to have that variation in student because the ones that don't know as much can learn from the ones that do, and the ones that know a lot even learn from the people that don't. So everyone's bringing something to the table, which I feel is really interesting. But what's so cool is that, like, that confidence in yourself that you like end up doing because you leave school and then you get these little projects and, they turn out well or they look good and you keep growing confidence. And what that does is it lets you put more and more of yourself into the work and not just doing it for other people. Because I think there's a lot of that happens when you're younger. And I think, you kind of want to control everything and not be as vulnerable. And the fun part is when you get more confidence is you can be more vulnerable and that ends up putting more of yourself into the work, especially if you find community and make films with people that look like you or that come from the same background or whether it's like work if you're a female and you work with another female, like there's all these environments where you'll thrive and it's really just trying to find that environment where you can thrive. And put yourself next to people that allow you to put yourself into the work, like Ryan. Like that's someone that does that for his crew and the people that he chooses. He really wants, like, he wants them to bring what they, their heritage, their culture into the work. So it's a very nice place, just to be like, to have the strength on set and to be able to be yourself and lead as yourself as a
Someone trusts you with that.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah, that's nice. Has there ever been an occasion where a collaboration changed the original plan for the better?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what we do, right? We make films. Actually, Greg Fraser told me this recently. It was a good little snippet. It's like it's about compromise. It's like making compromise work. Or making a film is about like that word exactly and how you can get through that. Because there's never enough time and there's never enough money. So it's really your job, at least as a cinematographer, for those in the room that are doing that or want to do that. Is to be a problem solver, to keep the visual language like that is on on the page, like from the start that the director, he or she gives you. But then also as you start shooting and there's all these complications and weather delays and schedule delays and financial delays and crew problems, it's your job to be a problem solver in order to still get that film that you guys decided was what you were making from the start. So yeah, with Ryan, it's, because, we're friends and, I care about him. When stuff, on our film on Sinners came up, you will work together with your whole team to make sure that you can still get the best image. And yeah, he changes stuff, a few days before, like the scene that you saw was supposed to be shot on Ultra Panavision because it was a scene that had a lot of dialogue and the IMAX camera is very loud, so it's not a sync sound camera. But I think 3 or 4 days before he changed it to IMAX, and that's exciting for me, So it does put a lot of pressure on the camera team, and because there's dialogue, and the camera is like 2 feet from someone's face sometimes in the close-ups. So it changes the whole environment of the set because when we're rolling, it's very loud. But and for the camera team as well, like it changes things. But I have a really good crew, and you want to support the director. So it's always, if things change or collaboration, or things change in after you guys prepared for it in the shooting, you want to be able to pivot and provide solutions or embrace it.
Yeah, just be like loosey goosey, like
Yeah.
come at me.
Yeah.
Let's go.
I mean, DPs are, known to be a little, can be like, really, we're doing that? But yeah, you want to be, open, obviously.
Ready for anything. We have another clip I just wanted to play. Are we able to play the next clip? Thank you so much. Not to be annoying, but I love how that whole scene is shot. I think it's so beautiful.
Thank you.
Could you talk a bit more about the conversation you had with Ryan to complete that scene? What kind of methods and technical choices you used when you were trying to capture dark skin tones, particularly?
I mean, I'll start with, yeah, the scene itself is my favorite scene. I talk about it a lot. I think for me, Hannah Beekler is someone I work with when I work with Ryan, and I adore her. She's like a sister, and she showed me a sketch, Ryan and I, a sketch on a scout we were doing in a car of that church, and she was very excited by it, and had a lot of history, and she did her research, and she poured a lot of love into making that, because that's a set on a piece of land that we went and scouted. So I was excited when she showed me the sketch, and I knew it would be great. And then you walk up to the set, and it's beautiful, and you start thinking like how you're going to light it, and what it means to you, and it's for me it's purely emotional. I think that's kind of how I shoot. That's how I light. And that's what I think Ryan appreciates about me, is that if it doesn't feel right, or if it doesn't feel emotional, I'm not going to shoot it. Like, I'll change it so that it can feel like those photographs that we talked about. Meaning, like, the inspiration was a book of photographs from Eudora Welty that he gave me early on, which is very similar to those two photographers that I mentioned. And they're very, like, personal photographs. There's a lot of humanity in those photographs. So that's what this scene was. And then obviously the whole film feels like that. Like, you could take an image from each of these scenes, and they could be one of those photographs in the book. Because that was the original reference that he gave me. So that was very important to me, I think, because you're shooting on film, but the people that you're working with, Hannah and then Ruth Carter, who's doing the costumes, they're all working at the highest level to create an environment that feels real. And so it's your job as a DP to protect all of that stuff, to protect their work and the environment, and to make sure that it looks beautiful. And so this scene, for instance, when we were shooting it, Ryan was just very excited. We had a 50-foot movie bird telescoping crane that we put in the middle of the church. So what that means is we were allowed to, like, we put the base outside, and we can just arm in when we needed to and create a way that, it left the blocking loose. So what that does is it allows Saul, who's the actor, who's Miles is also the actor, Sammy's father, to move about the space and preach and, kind of go in and out depending on how the blocking, suited. So that gives, like, some freedom to how you're allowed to shoot the scene. And so that's a conversation that I had with Ryan. And then I think, we have 2 cameras. He likes to shoot 2 cameras. And so when you shoot IMAX, there's really only one shot, because if you're doing a wide shot, it's on the 50 mil. We only had 2 lenses, or we're using the 80 mil. You want to be close with the 80, so that's going to be seen in the wide 50. So for this, it was only 1 camera. If I could fit a second camera in, I'd do it. But if it wasn't the right shot and it was just, arbitrary, I wouldn't do it. So most of this was shot with 1 camera on the crane. And then there's another scene in the church that is an ultra panavision. And then we were able to shoot 2 cameras because there's more lenses in that set for that format. But yeah, it's just a conversation. I mean, you sit there, you do the blocking, you watch it. The actors are really giving you everything. So it's your job to kind of sit back and look at the space and watch the rehearsal and find, the most emotional shot and the shot that's going to tell the story the most. And then you present that, and, you're discussing it with the director, and you figure it out with him or her. And that's how I like to work. I mean, we have a plan. Ryan and I, we like to storyboard. He'll storyboard the whole film, or we'll do previs for more, kind of complicated sequences. But ultimately, we can change it on the day, because we're not trying to. You don't want to get, like, the structure of how a film set works is, like, you can plan, but on the day, if there's, like, magic happening in front of you, and Michael goes and walks over here, or Miles does this, and you want to be able to pivot, and, like we were just talking about before, is capture what they're bringing to the table as well. So
Could you talk a bit more as well about capturing dark skin tones in a scene like that?
Oh yeah, I mean, exposure. How many people shoot film in this room here? Okay, not that many. So you guys are all mostly digital. Yeah, I think for me, I enjoy shooting film. I think I'm more inspired when I'm shooting film. It doesn't mean, I've done a lot of digital, but I think in film school, I started my career, my first feature, Macho, was on film that I shot with my classmates in the summer between my first and second year. And at the time, this was like 2008 and 9. my thesis, my MOS was on film. And then, all the films that I loved that made me want to be a DP were on film. So, I explored a lot in film school with my exposures, and you just figure out what you like. I mean, it's an emotional thing, but it's also a personal thing. And, that can be the case in digital too. Like if I shoot digital, I end up using like a very filmic LUT to slap on the digital to make it look like film. So it feels heavy and dense. And I'll do testing and, and get the digital into a place where I feel that it looks like film. But that's really personal. And I think with dark skin tones, it's like I do find that like a lot of people overlight black skin and brown skin because they think it needs more light, but it doesn't. And that bothers me. So I wasn't going to do that here, especially I think because, I'm a person of color and there's so much beauty in various skin tones and you want that beauty to sing.
The highlight.
And so I think, it's a very personal choice because you could shoot this movie, someone else could shoot this movie and light it differently for these skin tones. And, I think because, I come from, my mom's Filipino, my dad's black, like it's something that, I want the most beauty out of each skin tone. And I think it tends to be in the shadows sometimes. That beauty falls into the shadows. And so you'll get feedback from people, whether it's like, people that are fearful of that, they'll say like, it's too dark, they're too dark, but they're not really paying attention like to the actual image because there's so much reflective quality and, there's something to say about just sometimes an edge bringing out, a face. So yeah, I think all of these things you learn by doing testing, you learn through your own experience, you learn from your own culture or, you know, just everything. And so I think these exposures are very personal to me. And Ryan trusts me, and I think Ryan wants these people to look beautiful. They're a part of our heritage, and so I think it's really nice to work with a filmmaker that's very brave and trusts you, like Ryan, because it allows you to explore and do this stuff. Because someone's going to say something about the exposure, trust me. And then it's your job to say, trust me, this is like audiences will enjoy this. Like, you know, they'll still be able to see these people. They'll still be able to see the performances. You're not taking away from the actor's performance. You're adding to it. And you just have to be really strong in those decisions and then work with someone that protects you and believes in you, really.
No, thank you. Something that I have seen, and I think quite a few people in this audience might agree with me, is that there isn't much representation in this industry at all, even now in 2026. I found that you've mostly collaborated with women and other people of colour, which I think is great and very just inspiring. Is this a purposeful choice on your part?
It's an interesting question, right? Because there's no harm in like what I was saying before when you want to feel comfortable, right? You want to like being an artist is getting in that zone of creativity where you're vulnerable, right? And like something comes out of you that's inspiring, and then you do it, and then you share it with others, and they feel what you feel. So to feel like safe and vulnerable, it's generally would be, someone that looks like you, or someone, that's of the same gender, or someone that you can understand, right? They understand you, you understand them. It makes it for a better environment. It doesn't mean that you can't find that in people that are the opposite of you. It's all about like sometimes it can be a connection in personality, or you can be different than them, but grow up in the same area and understand what that means growing up in, the South in Australia or something, just like you just want to have a connection to who you work with. But I have been fortunate enough that my strongest connections and my best work has been with people like Ryan. And I think it's because he creates an environment where, first of all, women can be themselves. Most of our heads of department are women of color. We're allowed to lead a crew. We're allowed to just be ourselves. We don't, even though, sometimes you find sets where there's, could be the only woman. That's not the case on our set, but if it's Ryan's set, you see yourself reflected all around, and it feels very comfortable. So you lead in a very comfortable way, in a very confident way. And in turn, you get movies like this, So yeah, there's something to say about that. And I think I only know about it because I've, done so much. So I've seen what it's like when I'm not on a Ryan set or not on a Gia set or, other sets. But I have found myself being the only person of color on a set. And, it still is okay because, you know, I'm the leader of whoever this is, that he or she or director, trusts me. And they make an environment that's a good environment. So it's not to say that it can't happen on sets where you are the minority, because as you say, it can be very daunting in this business, because there isn't as much diversity as we'd hope. But I encourage you to just find good people. Number one, find good people. And then if the stories that you like to tell are within your own community, people that look like you, which is like where I'm sitting now, it feels really nice because there aren't a lot of these stories. So I'm very fortunate and honored to stand with Ryan and tell them. And they make me feel better because they're about my family.
And it makes me feel better to watch them as well. um, I personally also find that we also do this thing, and other people in the audience may agree. We're kind of having to do double the work to get half the reward, kind of being our own cheerleader. Have you found that's the case for you as well? We're kind of like having to push.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about earlier, and I think one thing I like to, I mean, as a woman, for the women in the audience, I mean, I have to do more anyways, right? Because I'm in a business where there aren't as many women. So, you know, it'll ultimately, I'm going to be watched a little bit more because, like, if you're in a room and there's only one, who are you going to look at? You're not going to look at the 99% of the other people that look exactly the same. The one person's going to stand out more. So you know, that's something I've always felt like in this career coming out of film school, is that like, because I was, you know, a minority in, you know, whether it was a woman or a woman of color, I wanted to make sure I knew what I was doing. I wanted to make sure that if someone asked me what I wanted, that I had an answer for them, that I knew how to manage a crew, that I knew the answers to every single job, so that no one would ever look at me and say, I don't know, that I didn't know what I was doing, right? Because that sometimes can be the case, right? And it's not to say that it's not going to happen to a man as well. Not that there's going to be a man on set and he doesn't know what they're doing. He doesn't know what he's doing, and they're going to point it out. It's just something I felt in this career because there's a lot of management in this career. You know, budgets are on the line. People are all looking at you to execute big ideas, that I wanted to make sure that I did it well for all of the women that came after me, for all the women that came before me and opened those doors for me. I wanted to like make them proud and not mess that up, to be honest. So yeah, I mean, I'm always going to work harder, but I want to work harder. Like, I want to make sure that, you know, if you're going to be the only person that's out there doing it, or one of the very few, you're going to do a good job, because you want everyone that you're representing, you want to represent them in a really good way, so that, you know, that gender or that culture looks strong, and people know that you can do it. Because, you know, I'm sure there's lots of people out there that think, whether you're a man or a woman, that, you know, they'll look at you and you'll have those experiences where someone will think you can't do something. So I had them early on, and, you know, I vowed to just make sure that, you know, it happens very rarely. And then you lean on, you know, your crew. You surround yourself with great crew that support you and look after you, so that when there's something that, you know, gets difficult, they're there to, you know, to put you, you know, to help you, because you can, I think as a DP early on, you can have sometimes people on your crew that, you know, don't help you, and that doesn't feel very good either. So choose wisely.
Do you have any examples that come to your mind when you think about your crew helping you in a way where you couldn't?
Oh, every day. I mean, just every day. I mean, I work with the same crew. I think it's funny because early on, I remember, you know, I always looked up to Matty Libatique, and he's a friend now. And, you know, for me, that was very important because he's Filipino. I went to AFI. He came. I was thinking if it's a Requiem, a Dream. I can't remember what he screened at the time, but I was so nervous. I was a student, and I was like, I want to go talk to him so bad, and I wanted to be like, I'm Filipino too, you know. And I was too nervous because back then I was very, very nervous. And I remember I did go up to him and I shook his hand, but it felt nice. It just, you know, there's this one person, and there weren't like millions, you know, but there was that one DP, and his work was so good, and it, you know, Requiem was such a affecting film for me early on. That, you know, I just felt it, you know, in my bones. And so that was really nice. And so I felt like after that, you know, it was very encouraging. Like, that felt very encouraging to meet him, to see him, and just to want to do that for other people as well. Yeah.
Yeah. The last question I have is, do you have any advice or anything to say to anybody in the audience, anybody watching, any little girls that see themselves in you? Any advice for them? Just to...
Yeah, be yourself. I mean, don't be afraid to be yourself, because I think a lot of the time you can find yourself in environments where you're afraid to be who you are. And filmmaking is one of those things where it's like, we want your perspective. That's the whole point, right? The point is that you're pouring yourself into the work. I want to know what you have to say. I don't want to know what your copy of someone else has to say. I want to know exactly what you have to say. So I think, I try to, when I do these talks, to tell everybody, obviously people that look like me, but also just every student that I talk to, man or woman, that, it's important to be vulnerable. It's important to put yourself in a community where you're being trusted, right? Because I think that's what people are afraid of. They're afraid of being themselves and then someone telling them it's not right, or that they're not interested. And I don't think that creativity, I don't like when it lives in a place of fear. I think you have to be, there's no place for it in filmmaking. I think you have to be brave, and you have to, with the way you move the camera, with your exposures, how you light, how you do everything. And so, yeah, I think that's mostly what I tell people. Oh, and I forgot, because I went off on a tangent. The reason why I brought up Maddie was because early on I learned that he really worked with the same crew, and he brought his crew up. I found that, he would have a crew member, and he would continue to work with them. And even when, he was doing smaller stuff, and then he would do bigger stuff. And so I modeled myself after that. Like, I really enjoyed creating a family and working with someone, for a long time, and having that person like go through your career with you. Until this day, like a lot of the people that worked on this film were people I've been working with for like 10 years. And so you create a family, and that's something I think I didn't learn personally from him, but I saw him doing that, and I heard about it a little bit. So that's why I brought him up.
Nice. And you mirrored that for yourself, and it's worked.
Yeah, I mean, it works. Sometimes it doesn't. Like, some people like to switch it up a lot, and there's nothing wrong with that, I think. Yeah. I think it depends on who you're working with, really. Let me give you an example so I can tie it into something. Like, well, I'll do this one first. With Ryan, he loves to move the camera around. I mean, so do I, but I would say that, like, there's the DP's love for it, and then there's also the director's love for it, because, he's working very closely with the actors. So say you have a DP that likes to move the camera around, but the director also needs to be on board with that, because it's a blocking thing, right? Like, it has to work for blocking, and then you have to make sure that, I also like to make sure it works for lighting. So it's very collaborative in that process. With Sinners, for instance, Ryan, there's a sequence, I don't think we have it here, but she walks across the street in the grocery store scene when Smoke goes to, the Chow's, the grocery store, and her daughter walks across the street. It's a Steadicam oneer, and then we get her mom, and then Lily's the name of the actress. She walks back across the street, and that whole sequence was very important to Ryan. He wanted to tell that story in one shot so that you could see that it was a black side of the street and a white side of the street, and he loves like doing these kind of oneers. He always has them in his films. And they're oneers that are based off of like true storytelling. Like, they're not just for the sake of a oneer. It's something that, he'll introduce because he feels that it's going to tell the story really well, and be economical as well. So I loved, those challenges and working with him in doing that. And so that just means you have to work with the production designer, and, your gaffer and your focus puller, and, your Steadicam operator. And it's really a dance. So, for me, I think I always like to just sit in the space and kind of walk around the space. And sometimes I'll use my iPhone, when we're on a scout. It doesn't mean that space has to be fully put together. And that's kind of a simple, example of like moving a camera around, but it works for story. But it takes a lot of orchestration, especially like in that lighting, you have to balance your exposures because she's going outside. It's very bright. So my gaffer and I, Brian Barlini, we had to make sure that space, and then also my key grip for rigging a bunch of lights in the ceiling, we had to make sure that space could handle a lot of we lit it up inside so I could do an iris pull and make sure. So it's like there's all these elements in creating and moving the camera that aren't just the choreography. It has to do with especially when you're shooting film, exposure and all that stuff. So there's that side of it, and then there's the musical wonder that's in the film that's way more complex and has the sound team and the composer and the choreographer, and then dancers who are being flown in and different cultures being represented, and that's really diverse, and that's something that was beautifully written on the page from Ryan. But that takes a lot of meetings and previs, and it's very complex. But you want to make sure that when you're moving the camera that it doesn't feel stuck or it doesn't feel technical. It needs to always flow and feel emotional. And then again, with the lighting, it's like if the camera's doing, wonder around the space, you have to light the space in a way that you're not going to see the lighting. So yeah, everyone's working together. And I think it's just, again, with being brave, like, obviously, some people like to chop things up, but I think wonders are a brave choice. And when they work, they're really good. I always say that, like, you're only going to feel constrained if what's on the page isn't reflected in the budget, right? So if someone comes to me and they want to make Loki and they have $5 million, that's not going to work. But if they want to say they only have $2 million and they want to do Last Showgirl, then it's okay, right? You have enough, you create an environment where you can do your best storytelling, but also it has to be reflected in what's written. Because I think a lot of the time you're going to get in trouble if what's written on the page you really don't have the resources to execute. And then ultimately, when the film is made, it feels less of, it can't tell the story as well. So I find that, like, when I was challenged early on, and I was like, well, it calls for this on the page, and, we don't have enough for lighting, or we have no money for a crane, or, you change it. You fix it by adjusting the script, or you work with the director in order to, like, create something that still gets the point across or tells the story, or maybe, it doesn't, there is not a wide shot anymore. It becomes something different. So I think you really have to be creative and just use, not necessarily what's available to you, but be creative in a way that, like, you create a whole environment that's going to make everyone successful. Because it's not just your department, right? Like, if there's not enough money for production design, then you're going to encourage the production to find spaces and do more scouting to find spaces that already have the right look for what's in the page, what's in the script. And that's going to save you, right? Because if the producer comes to you and says, well, we can only afford this location and there's nothing in there, and the production designer has $5 for a plant, it's like, well, this scene's going to be shit. It's not going to be good. So then you have to push and encourage them to do more scouting, to find a place that's fully outfitted but has what's there. And so I've been in that situation, and it makes the movie more successful. And ultimately, you're also, doing a little bit of that producing work, in your own department, because you want the movie to be good, whether you have, little money or a lot of money. So I find that there, now in doing various budget levels, there's definitely, like, the same challenges. There's never enough time. There's never enough money. But if you can think creatively and you think about other departments too, not just your own, ultimately you can help the film, small or big. There's a film, I'll just, because you're, filmmakers. My husband shot a movie called Magazine Dreams. Not many people saw it because they didn't promote it as much as, you know, um, they would have, but it was a very small film. But when I watch that film, it doesn't feel small to me. I think, yeah, watch it and then you can tell me what you think. But it's a beautiful film, and it was made with not as many resources as you'd think, but I think Adam did a beautiful job in creating that feeling environment that was needed for what was on the page. And I only know there wasn't a lot of resources because I know the backstory. But if you see it, I'm not sure you'd think that. Yeah. Um, I guess I'll start with the MCU. Like when we were making Loki, first of all, when I had that interview with Kate Heron, like Kate and then our production designer, who's a really close friend now, Khara, we none of us had done anything huge before. And so it was a really cool place to play because we had big ideas. We were all on the same page of how we wanted it to look. And it was very, very strong production design, strong camera work. Kate and I's references. We hadn't known each other. So when we met for our interview, she had a lookbook and I also made a lookbook as well. And it just had the same stuff in it. So it was really cool. So you kind of knew it was like, we're on the same page. You know, it had very heavy like mood and tone, and that's something that I like to do, you know, and I love making the lighting have character. And so, you know, we all were on the same page, and we wanted to make this, you know, look different but strong. And, you know, even though people were used to seeing Tom as that character, we wanted to give it a new kind of flavor. And so I think what's fun about that is like when you're all working together to kind of elevate the work or create frames that tell a new story for something that people are used to. You know, she was very open to how I framed that. So I like to kind of, you know, Seven was a reference, Zodiac was a reference. And, you know, kind of these lower angles, making sure like our team at the time made sure that there were ceilings because, you know, sometimes with Marvel, you know, previous work is like, you know, there's no ceiling, so you can light everything and it's very flat and makes it a lot easier because ceilings are very expensive. And so we fought to have ceilings, and, you know, it was one of those things where it was better for the story, it was better for the look, it was better for post, for VFX. But it also helped like the whole thing, like all of these small choices that you make and you fight for, end up, you know, making the work stronger and making the characters look stronger and braver because they walk into a space now, right? Like they walk into a full space that looks exactly like what's on the page, and it allows them to give better performances. It allows you to create realistic lighting, you know, lighting that's, you know, built into the space. You work with a designer, so everyone's winning, but it costs more. So that, and then there's that management side of that, this strength that you speak of, where you have to work with your team in order to convince that, like, in order to pull this off, we need, you know, X. And if you trust us and we, you know, execute this well, it'll be better for the story. People will like it more and it'll be, you know, an overall plus for everything. And so yeah, there's all these different layers to that. But I think it was really nice that like all of us hadn't done that level before. So we had something to prove, but we also, we're all on the same page visually. And there was a lot of trust there and a lot of support from the studio, which is really nice. Like when you have that, you can think outside the box. Yeah, I think, I mean, I kind of answered that a bit already. I think it's very personal. I think I did a talk recently at IMAX, and a gentleman in the audience asked me because it was like a masterclass thing where I was doing a talk about sinners, but earlier in this class, he was being taught exposure, and you know he was being given a bunch of technical information. And he's like, "Well, what about when you do this and that and the other?" And I was like, "Just forget all that, you know, like because you're clogging your head with a bit too much there." That it's not allowing you to emotionally react to what you feel is right, you know, because you're worried too much about, you know, the certain things. I mean, obviously you have to do a little bit of that so that it comes out and you don't get your film back and it's completely pitch black. But you also want to play and you want things to, you know, you want to be brave. And I remember when I was at AFI and Bill Pope came in, who's kind of was a mentor of mine early on, and I was introduced to him, and someone in our audience, who was a classmate, was asking a very technical question. It's like, he's like, don't worry about that. And I remember thinking, wow, he's saying that, you know, Bill Pope is saying that. And it was cool because I think it happens sometimes when if you're worried so much, your head is filled with all of that worry and all that technical information. I mean, you have to learn and you have to make sure you know, have trial and error and fail and, you know, so you know what works and doesn't work. But I think, like I mentioned before with exposure, it's very personal. Like it's what you think looks beautiful. And luckily, you know, like what I think looks beautiful for these skin tones, I've heard that it's what my people think looks beautiful. Like I've found out that a lot of people have messaged me or have told me that like they think that a lot of the Black people represented in this film look beautiful, and they haven't looked like that before. So yeah, it's, I think, like I said, it's a bravery thing, but it's also very personal. And then, you find out that, oh, what I think is also what you think, yeah. So. For me, like, when you do something for the first time, I don't care what it is, and you do a really good job, and you're like, yeah, we fucking killed that, right? Like, as a team, right? Whatever it is, like it's sports or it's like filmmaking or cooking or whatever it is, it feels really, really nice. And I find that, like, I've had a lot of that type of feeling when I work with Ryan, because like I said before with him, it's like he's very excited by doing something new and trusting the people around him to execute that really well. And so what that does is it's like a really good leader, a really good teacher, right? He's a coach. So anything he's going to throw at you that you don't know, he's going to throw it at you in a way that makes you confident that you can execute that. So right off the bat, working with people like that, I find very inspiring. And so in this regard, it's like, nothing is impossible. It's like, I've not done this before, but like, I'm going to go figure it out. And I surround myself with really good technicians that love what they do, but also back me and support me. And we're going to make sure that we like do everything that we can to figure it out and make sure that when we're on set with Ryan, that there's no mistakes, that we figure everything out to a point that he can just feel secure and confident that he can make the movie in any way that he wants. And that's a nice thing to have, right, for a filmmaker, because you don't want someone like a director to feel nervous about their crew. You don't want the director to feel like that there's going to be mistakes, or that they can't trust, someone on your crew doing something. You want to make sure that they can do anything. They can move the camera anywhere. They can shoot anything. They can do anything. Car rigs and just anything. Night shoots by rivers and the bayous and stuff. So yeah, I work really closely with my focus pullers, my Ethan McDonald and Andre Crawford. Andre was my second, my B camera focus puller on Black Panther. Ethan, I've been working with for 10 years. We did Last Showgirl together, Mainstream together, so smaller films. So Ethan kind of knocked it out of the park because he hadn't done large format. He's a very, very good focus puller. And I really just trusted him. I knew that he could do it. And I think in giving him that trust and believing in him, he executed really well. And you fight for that stuff, like, because someone's going to point out that the person that you've hired doesn't have all the things on the resume. It's going to be a conversation. But again, going back to Ryan, it's like I'm surrounded by a man who does that, right? So that's a leader, and then you want to be able to reflect that in how you do your job with your crew, and believe in the people that work for you. So they did a fantastic job. The focus pulling in this movie is exceptional. It's not easy. I shoot wide open. It's the largest format you can shoot. The camera's moving everywhere. But I didn't have to worry about the focus because they did such a good job. And then I operated a camera. So that's just a hard job in general, I think, when you're shooting these formats, because there's a lot of stuff in your head. Like, I'm exposing it, but I'm also operating. But I like to be in that position because that's how I learned to be a DP. I've always operated. When I do Marvel, it's a little harder because you're doing, like, 6 cameras and stuff like that. But you want to be the best place for a DP to be, in my opinion, is right next to the camera, right next to the director, seeing everything through that eyepiece, and lighting from that perspective. So operating for me is something that, like, I don't think I can do what I do if I don't operate. And then I have a B camera operator that I always use, Josh Medak, and I love him and I trust him. And I'll always show him what I want out of the B camera, because my thing is, like, you don't want the B shot to feel like a B shot, right? You don't want the audience to be like, that's the B camera. The B shot should always be as good as the A shot. So yeah, I think again, my crew, I work with them, but it's really just, it's like you're running a really tight knit, kind of like team, and you're going to war a little bit, and you want to make sure that everyone has, all the answers when people come ask us questions. And it was funny because my second AC, who I work with all the time, who doesn't have a bunch of features on his resume, Alan Certeza, he's Filipino. And, Ethan and I, kind of fought. We're like, we're going to bring this person with us because this person is so fucking good at his job. And he killed it. And he hadn't been a second on a huge movie like this before, but, we believed in him, and he's very good at what he does. So, and, to the point where like all of these people, my gaffer and my key grip and my camera team, like they all killed it. So that's how you get these types of images. We don't just do them by ourselves. Everyone has to be working at the highest level. So. Yeah, I think, as a DP, it's also like the editor is so important as well. And again, Ryan works with this editor that he met in college, USC, Michael Shaver, who's brilliant. And so after I saw that scene, I was like, this scene's really good. But it also has to do with the way it's edited too, right? That feeling that you have, like it's all very, collaboration. Because I think, I don't really see that process. I wait to see it till the end. And I think Ryan and him did a beautiful job of editing that scene. But again, it was on a crane. And so, how that scene was planned out is like, if someone's giving a sermon, you want them to be able to give the sermon. You want to, at least in that scene, in most of the scenes that Ryan and I do, we want the actors to act and be able to move around the space. So in order to do that, you have to like creatively think of a way that the camera can get what you want, like, logistically, but aesthetically, but not get in the way. And so the best use of it there, to keep all, because the last thing you want to do is like, let's take out all the bleachers and then we'll move them back in and then we'll move them back out and we'll put this there. And that. It's like that's going to create chaos, and that's ultimately not going to be good for the scene and the actors because you're moving things about. Like now all of a sudden people feel like they're on a film set. It's going to disrupt the flow. Like the most important thing is to keep the flow. Like I feel like because the scene is better for it, right? If the actors feel like they're in real space. So that's why we use the crane, which was a way to like just be able to bring it back and forth. And, we did blocking. So, we would do the blocking and then we would say, okay, where are you going to be, Saul? Like you're going to be in this, kind of path here when you're giving your sermon. But I'm on the crane, so it does feel floaty because I'm also reacting. Like I have to frame him, right? So it's a floating head, it's a remote head, stabilized remote head on a telescopic arm, but there is a float to it because I don't want them to feel my operating, but I'm also reacting in the moment. And I remember when like Miles was, really in the scene and he was emoting and he had the scratch on his face. It was very beautiful. It was a very hard shot because like that's an 80 mil on a crane. I'm just trying not to fuck up. So, so all of those things, like there's very technical stuff going on, but I'm also reacting to the moment and trying to stay out of the way and create an environment that, allows Ryan to, have freedom. And then, yeah, Hannah's set is, there's all this like iconic like structure that, she's very aware of and, she knows our format and we have conversations about like, well, what does a 50 mil look like if I'm, at the back of the church and we did some measurements and, I'd say like, okay, well, this is the field of view for that, so she's going to build the set in a way that makes sure that like on the 50 mil at this distance, I can get this. And I remember I did some math for her in prep just to show her like, how tall it would be or like, just this type of thing. So it's all, thoughtful stuff that you do in prep. But I agree with you. Like that's a nice way to put it because there is something ethereal about the way it moves there. But it's also built out of the fact that like you kind of want them to be able to do the whole scene and not get in the way and move the bleachers around. Yeah, definitely film. And I think it starts with the director, right? Because I think, and maybe the people who have shot film in here understand it's like you, everyone's like, oh, that's going to cost more, and it puts more pressure on production. So it's going to be like a fight, and then it helps if like because it also is, it's the sets run in a completely different way when you shoot film, and Ryan and I like that, and Gia as well. And so I find that like if it comes from the director and they want that to happen, then it, you have a better shot at it. But I also sometimes if I have to, like on Last Showgirl, I put my foot down and I was like, because it was something she wanted to do and she felt it was important. And when we were getting pushback, I was like, I'm not going to shoot it if it's not on film. And ultimately, you just have to be like, you have to know that it's gonna benefit the film, and you have to kind of convince all the people that are fearful that it's the right choice. And then ultimately, like the film is out, it's over, and everyone's like, oh yeah, it's great that it was on film, and you're like, okay, yeah. So you have to see, ahead and kind of, so I find that I like that process. Like I like to kind of find something that is inspiring that will be like a better choice overall for everything. So for me, I think that format is my favorite. And again, the sets run completely different. There's a different pacing, there's different pressure, there's different inspiration. There's also the DP's relationship to everything is different on set because I light different when I shoot film. And then also, you know, I'm the only one that knows if it's exposed for like a day and a half, because I'm exposing it. The HD tap is, just a reference really. And I like that personal relationship that, it's kind of like very private as, the person that's metering and exposing. And so, yeah, I think because it's so exciting, every time I do it, it's new. It feels new, even though it's, super old. And so funny enough, yeah, it feels new all the time. I mean, I've only done it recently on the last two pictures, and then my first film was shot on film, and so there was a big kind of gap where I shot a lot of digital. And yeah, again with Ryan, it's like, he's just, if he's excited, I'm excited. I mean, I guess you'd understand if you're working with someone and they're every day they have a smile on their face, and so that can be intoxicating, and so then it makes you excited as well, and so I like that feeling. And usually film does that for people. They feel like, like untethered, right? Because like you feel a little restricted sometimes with digital because there's a monitor there. There's like 20 people at the monitor pointing fucking everything out. That's annoying for me. Yeah, I mean, it's your job to figure out what the best tool is. And I think if you operate, that's kind of why I was saying before, like, I think it's good to operate. Like, I kind of came up in doing that, and then I went to film school, and it's where I feel I do my best work because you'll feel when it's wrong, right? Like, I've done, like, for instance, you do a shot, so there's a blocking, you watch it, you're like, this should be handheld. Director's like, okay, let's do it handheld. And then you do it, you rehearse it, and then, okay, in the rehearsal, you're like, okay, sure. And then you roll on it, and then, you're thinking about it, you're like, this is the wrong tool. Let's get the dolly and let's put on the dolly, like lay track or dance floor, whatever it is. You just know, I feel like that's how I work is like, I know when it's right and I know when it's wrong. So it's coming from me, right? If I'm making a decision to change it or to suggest something, it's because I feel it's the best tool. And then, if we watch it and then the director's like, it's not, or you feel it's not, then you should change it quickly. Because I think when I was younger, and it happens to everybody, when you're starting out, you don't want to interrupt, somebody, right? You're like a little afraid to kind of say like this is wrong, or you're afraid to tell the gaffer that like you don't like the lighting, that they've done, or you told them how to light it wrong and it doesn't look good. And then you're like, oh shit, well, if I say something, it's going to take 20 minutes to fix, and I don't want to do that. So then, but you have to remember, you have to live with it after that. It's got your name on it, and it was your decision, because you're leading the whole team. And so yeah, I find that like, trust your gut, like, what is the right thing, and mostly watch, like, be very aware in the rehearsal, like, be in the space, watch the actors move around the space, look at the light in the space before they get there, and feel it, like, you'll figure it out. I use a finder. That's how I like to work. I have a finder, put the lens on it. I pick the lens. I show, director where I want the camera and, just, discuss it. And that's kind of that's my process. So I use a finder. Um, yeah, I mean, it has to, like, you and the director are a team, right? So you have to pick people, or like pick projects where you feel like you're going to be protected by that person, right? Because everybody, you'll ultimately, you know, when you get and do bigger stuff, everyone's always in service of the director. Even if the producer doesn't agree with the director, like at the end of the day, it's the director that everyone's there for, telling the story. The actors are there for the director. So you have to find this person that's going to protect you, you're going to be on the same page with, because ultimately you're going to lean on them for those battles when, you know, you are getting kickback, right? And you have to do it in a way that it has to always be in service of the story, right? Because ultimately, at least in the pictures that I'm choosing, it's about making a good film, a film that people want to watch, a film that people are going to talk about, a film that people are going to see and feel. And if the choice to shoot it, like the example I gave, Last Showgirl, is it's going to make it a better film if it's shot on film, because, you know, you're putting pressure now on everybody, right? Because like we're shooting in Vegas and we're going to shoot on film, and then no one's going to see the dailies for, you know, 2 days, and it's going to be shipped. Someone has to come grab it, put on a plane, then it has to go in the bath. Then someone's going to have to do a telecine. Then they're going to get a call. Then they're going to get a video. And oh, this, you know, we only have Jamie Lee Curtis for 2 days, so we're going to let her go. And then, you know, if the film doesn't expose, then, you know, you're going to get in trouble. There's all this shit, right? And people are scared. And so you have to be confident in that choice, whatever it is, like to ask for the crane or to ask for, you know, a bunch of negative to put up to make the, you know, outside more, you know, contrasty or shapely, like whatever you're asking for that's going to make it a better thing. You have to know what you're talking about, and you have to see 10 steps ahead of what they're going to say no for, right? So they're going to come back and they're going to say, well, we don't have the time. So then you're going to go talk to your key grip and your gaffer, and you're going to be like, how much time is it going to take to do this? And then you're going to go to the director and be like, this can be better for the scene. It's going to look better. If it looks flat and bright, it's not going to be as emotional. It's not going to be as good. So then you know, it's like gathering all the information. So there's nothing left on the table for them to come at you and say, well, what about this? Or, you know, because ultimately it's like, it's that game that, you know, you're playing a game. You might have to waste like 3 hours of your time explaining yourself, but it's for the right cause. And you have to do it in a very thoughtful and educational way. And you don't want to be aggressive, right? Like no one wants to deal with that. And not to say that people, you know, there are some like that probably get ultimately what they want. But I find that if you come at it a little bit too much with aggression, then you're going to have to carry that the whole shoot, right? Because then they're going to get scared, and then the whole shoot they're going to be afraid to, you know, whatever, talk to you or give you what you want. So yeah, it's being smart. You got to be smart about it and know everything, like about what you're in charge of. You know, with your crew, have a really good crew, obviously, but know all the elements that they're going to ask you about so that you have an answer for them.